I'm Heather Gatlin, Executive Director of LLILAS Benson Latin American Studies and Collections. On behalf of all of us at LLILAS Benson, I extend a warm welcome, bienvenidos, benvindos, to each of you this evening. Thank you for joining us to honor former leaders of the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection and the Teresa Lozano Long Institute of Latin American Studies, and to honor and celebrate Charles R. Hale, who we all know as Charlie, as the first director of LLILAS Benson Latin American Studies and Collections. At the conclusion of our ceremony this evening, we invite you to join us for a reception in the main reading room of the Benson Collection. I now welcome to the podium Dr. Ginny Garrard-Burnett, Professor of History and Religious Studies, and Dr. Raul Madrid, Professor of Government, two of our MCs this evening.
Thank you, Heather. Well, friends and colleagues, it feels like a family reunion, doesn't it? We're so glad to have you here. We're so glad you could come and join us today. As you know, we are here today to celebrate Charlie Hale's tenure as director and to thank him as he steps down. But we also want to take this opportunity to take a long view of Latin American studies at the University of Texas with an eye to where we've been and an eye to where we're headed. As the first director of LLILAS Benson Latin American Studies and Collections, Charlie Hale oversaw the joining of two university institutions of historic standing. And so today it's only right to honor him and also to honor those who went before him to serve in leadership roles in the Benson and in Latin American studies.
So today we are pleased to have with us all but one of the former leaders of the LLILAS and the Benson who are still living. We recently conducted video interviews with many of them that will be archived for public use. I'm going to begin with Dr. William Glade, a brief introduction of him. William Glade served as director of ILAS for 15 years, from 1971 to 1986. A scholar as well as a gentleman, Bill published widely in the field of Latin American development and held various academic and governmental posts, including Associate Director for Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Information Agency. Dr. Glade brought to ILAS his extensive professional and academic networks, which enlivened the Institute. A few years back, I remember how when former Chilean President Ricardo Lagos came to ILAS, he recounted how Bill essentially rescued him after the 1973 coup in Chile by bringing him to UT for a stint here. Under his leadership, LLILAS created the Brazil Center, the Mexico Center, as well as the Andean Studies Center. Latin American Research Review also came to UT for the first time then. In addition, and this dates him a little bit, Bill created a radio program that showcased the research of LLILAS-affiliated faculty. And finally, Bill created ILAS's first interdisciplinary faculty seminar. So we will now watch a short video about his tenure.
I think the value of the Institute of Latin American Studies or any similar interdisciplinary institute which has a teaching program as well as a research program is that it brings the faculty together across departmental lines and encourages collaboration sometimes across departments. We never really had, after 1 or 2 years, official approval for an interdisciplinary seminar. So we had to, as the Brazilians would call it, do a little jeito around this problem. So since we had our own seminar rooms over here, we could schedule 2 seminars to meet concurrently in adjacent classrooms on the same topic, but by faculty from different departments. And we were not going to be the hotel detectives and say they couldn't mingle their classrooms and students and so forth. So we had interdepartmental seminars, but we had to do it on the side, as it were. Those were extremely valuable seminars for all the students and also for the faculty, because they learned more about what they could learn from collateral disciplines.
Hey, Rick Adams headed ILAS from 1986 to 1990. He came to the directorship as a side trip in a distinguished career as an anthropologist. His work on Guatemala in the 1950s through the 1980s continues to be influential even today. Under the leadership of Rick and his associate director, Mike Conroy, ILAS took its first activist turn. This was during the Central American crisis of the early 1980s, and Rick and Mike both were Central Americanists. The Institute became actively involved in disseminating information and educating people, both in the academy and in the community at large, about the reality of what was going on in the region. And this was often at odds with what they were hearing from the U.S. government and the national media. But at the same time, Rick also nurtured and advanced serious academic work in and about other regions of Latin America, especially Mexico. He was also instrumental in helping to hire some of the people who would help shape LLILAS and the centers in coming years, people like Brian Roberts and Alan Knight, Peter Ward and Victoria Rodriguez, Arturo Arias, and others. He even brought in the young, beardless Charlie Hale as a postdoc fellow. Peter Cleaves served as director of ILAS from 1990 to 1995. Peter, who, although he also had the academic credentials, was the first director of Latin American Studies to come to us from the world of NGOs and management. Under him, the Institute moved into some innovative new directions, most of them built around getting Latin American Studies at the University of Texas known and appreciated outside the hermetic world of academia. Under Peter, ILAS extended its public profile substantially. Some of his initiatives included the cultivation of an op-ed writing program for our faculty, the creation of an advisory council to the Mexican Center to bring in advice and preferably money from the outside, and substantial support for the dramatic expansion of UT Study Abroad programs in Latin America. Perhaps of greatest significance was the creation of LANIC, the Latin American Network Information Service, which in those pre-Google Internet days was the first major initiative to bring Latin America-related news and information together through a single online portal.
Of course, something happened during this period. It was sort of the burgeoning of the internet. And we started talking internally. Should we create a database, a platform here that would sort of provide new information for the Latin American community? And I said, well, wait a second, if you look at it, how are we going to finance that? We can't possibly create. Is there any way to get a platform which is virtually free? And so we said, yes, you can. You just get other people's platforms on your platform. I mean, this is essentially what Google does. So we started this, and I don't want to say we were pre-Google, but we sort of were. And it was organized in a very, very systematic way so that people in government or business or teachers, and it became very valuable for teachers, to find out geography and history, economics, all organized on UT LANIC.
Nicholas Shumway served as the director of LLILAS from 1995 to 2006. An award-winning scholar of Latin American literature, Nick came to UT Austin from Yale University, where he had been a full professor and chair of Latin American Studies. I actually remember meeting Nick there my freshman year, first week. He is currently the Dean of Humanities and Francis Moody Newman Professor of Humanities at Rice University. As director of LLILAS, Nick helped bring back Latin American Research Review to UT Austin, and he welcomed many important visitors, including former Argentine President Carlos Menem and Spanish Judge Baltasar Garzón. He also led a modern-day premiere and recording of Brazilian composer José Mauricio Núñez Garcia's Missa de Nossa Senhora da Conceição of 1810. During his tenure, several new centers were created at LLILAS, including the Center for Latin American Social Policy, created by another one of our future directors, Brian Roberts, as well as the Center on Indigenous Languages in Latin America. Most importantly, ILAS received a $10 million endowment from the Joe Long and Teresa Lozano Long and became the Lozano Long Institute for Latin American Studies.
Certainly one of the major accomplishments of the Institute at that time, and I want to say the Institute is not something that I take credit for, was the gift that we received from Joe and Terry Long, which resulted in a change of the name of the Institute. It went from the Institute of Latin American Studies to the Teresa Lozano Long Institute of Latin American Studies, and then from ILAS to LLILAS, which is what it is called now. This was a very generous gift, and it was a very wonderful experience working with the Longs, because they're such wonderful people to begin with, but also planning how this gift would be used. And we were able to touch a number of different parts of the mission of the university through this gift. We had traveling fellowships for students, and I could give you a rather long list of students who went to Latin America because of Lozano Long traveling fellowships, and it really changed their lives. But we were also able to help graduate students through teaching assistantships. We were able to attract and retain really good faculty through the Lozano Long professorships. So this was a major change in the Institute, because we had resources we didn't have before.
Brian Roberts served as director of LLILAS from 2006 to 2009. Brian came to UT in 1986 from England to become a professor of sociology and the C.B. Smith Senior Centennial Chair in U.S.-Mexico Relations, a position he held until his retirement in 2014. Brian is the author or editor of 15 books and countless articles on urbanization, migration, and citizenship, among other issues. As director of LLILAS, Brian created the first elected faculty executive committee, as well as the first LLILAS Advisory Council. Both of these committees have been important additions to the governing structure of LLILAS. Under his leadership, LLILAS also created its own magazine, Portal, and launched the annual Lozano Long Conference Series, which brings major scholars and practitioners to UT Austin each year. Finally, as director, he also welcomed the addition of a new member of the LLILAS family, the Olmec head.
One of the anecdotes I remember of that time was the Olmec head, which is out there now. You can all see that. And the Olmec head was actually an idea of Marco Munoz's, and because he had good friends in the administration of the University of Veracruz, which owns the heads, and they've given it to Tokyo and various other places. So they said, yes, we'll give one to the University of Texas at Austin too. Wonderful. The only snag was we had to get the money for it, which was not insubstantial. I forget how much, but probably about $80,000 for the transport of it. We spent quite a lot of time actually getting the money together to bring this head here. We had to get letters from distinguished people saying, yes, the University of Texas should have one, etc. So then, sigh of relief, all was agreed, and the Olmec head began trundling from Veracruz to here. Then, minor panic. We received a call that the Olmec head had been stopped at the border with the United States because it did not have the right documents. It was an undocumented migrant. And so, fortunately, with a lot more effort, we got the right documents, and it finally came here and was established here. We had a very nice meeting.
It's hard to follow that, but now Our colleague Julianne Gilland, who is director of the Benson Latin American Collection, now joins us to introduce some of the head librarians who have carried on the legacy of Nettie Lee Benson.
Welcome, everyone. It's certainly my privilege to introduce three former head librarians and leaders who collectively served the Benson Latin American Collection for many decades. Their legacy, leadership, and dedication to librarianship and scholarship serve as an example to all of us, and we're grateful for their presence here today. Laura Gutiérrez-Witt served as head librarian of the Benson from 1975 to 2000, through 2000, immediately succeeding Nettie Lee Benson. And Laura had already worked at the Benson for a decade before she took over the head librarian position. She continues to be an avid supporter of the Benson, not least in the ongoing contribution to our collections through the Robert Charles Witt and Laura Gutiérrez-Witt Library Fund for Latin America, an endowment she established in 1998 to support the purchase of library materials in all formats for the Benson.
The Mexican-American Library project started, really it was a result of students agitating to get the libraries to collect materials on Latinos in the United States. And Harold Billings was instrumental in setting up the project so that it would function and materials would be acquired, there was a budget, etc. But as time went on, the project became a program because it was really well founded. It came under my my administration, and luckily we got some good people, and culminating with Margot, to really build that up. And so I'm very proud of that particular aspect of work that happened that got more and more important as time went on during the time that I was here. And it's continued because it has expanded. So we've been very lucky with that.
Anne Hartness was the Benson's head librarian from 2000 through 2008. She brought with her an expertise in Brazil and the Portuguese language that greatly enhanced the Benson's Brazilian collections and supported related research across our campus and beyond. She continues to contribute in this way through the Anne Hartness Fund for Materials on Brazil, established in 2013 to enhance our holdings. And another of Anne's lasting legacies at the Benson is a Viva Voz, the annual celebration of Latino arts and culture, which just had its 14th year and continues to bring new visitors to the Benson each spring.
The Benson collection has a very strong collection of U.S. Latino materials. Since we're in Texas, it's focused on Mexican Americans, but it actually includes materials related to a lot of other groups. I thought perhaps if we had an annual event related to some aspect of Latino culture, it would help to promote the collection. And so we began 14 years ago. We've had readings by authors, we've had a cartoonist, movie and TV actor, music programs, artists, photography. It was that impetus to publicize the collection and to make it more widely known that I felt was so important.
So I had the pleasure of working with the next head librarian, David Block, who served from 2009 until his recent retirement in 2014. David chose to end a distinguished career as a librarian and historian of Latin America, where he began, having earned his PhD in history and library science at UT, and as a student of Nettie Lee Benson. He went on to serve in the Peace Corps in Bolivia and was an institution in his own right as the Latin American librarian at Cornell for more than 2 decades before returning to the Benson, which he has called the high point of his career. Instead of a video, David, who is here with us today, so I hope he won't mind listening to it, shared an anecdote with us in honor of this occasion. I'm going to read it to you now. He wrote, "I'd been on the job for only a few months when an email arrived. Felicitaciones, it began, and he went on to explain, or the letter went on to explain, that the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American collection would be awarded the Medalla 1808 at an upcoming ceremony in Mexico City. And this was a time, David writes, when Nigerian fraudsters were thick on the internet, making bogus offers of large payoffs for a small fee. But as subsequent events would prove, this was the real deal. The Medalla 1808 was established in 2008 to recognize individuals and institutions whose contributions to the history and culture of Mexico have been particularly important. And previous winners included Carlos Fuentes, Miguel León Portilla, and David Brading. So in the middle of July 2010, David writes, I received the award, which was presented by the alcalde of Mexico City in the Antiguo Palacio del Ayuntamiento. The medal and its supporting documentation now reside in the rare books vault of the Benson collection. And in an amusing twist, David adds, one news source miscaptioned a photograph of me as Carlos Fuentes. We look so much alike, he writes. So thank you, David, for that memory. And now we invite our former head librarians and directors to the stage to receive a small token of our gratitude for their presence today and a quick photo. And Charlie, we invite you to come forward as well.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Moravia De La O. I'm a LLILAS master's student.
Hello, everyone. I'm Caroline Daigle, and I'm also a LLILAS master's student.
Caroline and I are co-chairs of ILASA, the Latin American Studies Student Association, and we were invited this afternoon to say a few words about Joe and Teresa Lozano Long, two people whose generosity has both sustained and transformed the Institute in the new millennium.
The Lozano Long Endowment is structured so that a full 60% of its resources directly benefit students through fellowships, travel grants, research funding, and beyond. As beneficiaries of this endowment, we are incredibly fortunate and extremely grateful. The Longs were unable to join us here today, but we ask you to please join us in acknowledging their generous support.
As we've witnessed this evening, the investment in Latin American studies and collections at the University of Texas at Austin is historic and deep, growing over time with the expertise, intellect, hard work, and enthusiasm of countless faculty, staff, administrators, students, and donors. In 2011, in a time of challenged resources and increasing austerity, the university further deepened this commitment by joining LLILAS and the Benson in an innovative partnership with a common director and mission. This groundbreaking partnership, now known as LLILAS Benson Latin American Studies and Collections, seeks to raise awareness of past and present issues that affect Latin American and U.S. Latino communities through our world-class collections, globalized higher education, research, international exchange, and public programs. The direct pairing of the abundant resources of the Benson Collection with the teaching and research of LLILAS has generated synergies that are turning the field of Latin American studies in new and exciting directions. The collaborative work taking place between librarians, faculty, students, and staff has allowed LLILAS Benson to build upon our historic strengths and become international leaders in exciting areas that push the boundaries of scholarship on multiple levels. There are a number of examples of these synergies. LLILAS Benson is seen as an international leader in post-custodial archiving, where librarians work in partnership with faculty and organizations throughout the hemisphere to maintain the cultural patrimony of collections while creating international access through digital archives hosted here at UT. Notable examples of this work include the Archivo Histórico de la Policía Nacional de Guatemala and the more recent Latin American Digital Initiatives Project funded by a Mellon Foundation grant. We are becoming leaders in digital scholarship, where librarians and staff partner with faculty and students to introduce digital tools and strategies in the classroom and into research practices that not only transform the educational experience of students, but enhance our collections and open up new directions in scholarship. Through our three-pronged Indigenous Language Initiative, we have elevated the research, acquisition, and instruction of Latin American Indigenous languages on the UT Austin campus. We host the Archive of the Indigenous Languages of Latin America, the Center for Indigenous Languages of Latin America, and in the past 3 years, we have taught students from across the university Quiché, Maya, and Nahuatl. With our Title VI National Resource Center grant from the U.S. Department of Education, we are further expanding on this work, with Benson librarians collecting indigenous language materials in Mexico, Brazil, Guatemala, and faculty and students and staff partnering with UT's Center for Open Educational Resources and Language Learning to develop online open access curriculum for the instruction of Quiché. Our partnership has re-energized our student programs, attracting the best and the brightest students from across the nation and across the hemisphere to UT Austin to engage with the interdisciplinary strengths of our faculty and collections and to pursue new directions in socially engaged scholarship. Our partnership has transformed our outreach to those beyond the borders of our campus. Through our public engagement programs, we continue to conduct teacher training, but now infused with Benson resources. Our exhibition program showcases unique Benson holdings with exhibits in our building and exhibits traveling across Texas and even in Mexico. We're building partnerships with Austin Community College, with Houston Tillotson University, sharing resources and programming with their faculty and students. Our Brazil and Mexico centers manage research and visiting scholar initiatives that connect scholars in those countries to resources here at UT. These are but a few examples of how LLILAS Benson embodies the motto of the University of Texas at Austin: what starts here changes the world. Of course, LLILAS Benson takes that motto one step further in promoting the idea that what starts in the world changes us here. The LLILAS Benson ethos of collaboration, communication, and coordination with partners on campus and across the hemisphere transcends all that we do. We have learned and continue to demonstrate through our partnerships that we are stronger together. Together, we preserve and more fully represent history. Together, we document and fight injustices. Together, we form and are formed by scholars and leaders whose work in academia and beyond is not only inspirational, but transformative. Together, we accomplish the mission and form the vision for LLILAS Benson. We do this with our 160-plus affiliated faculty, representing 13 colleges and schools and over 30 departments across campus. We do this with our 35 professional staff, our graduate research assistants, our teaching assistants, and our student employees. We do this with our undergraduate, our master's, and our PhD students who represent a diversity that spans the nation and the hemisphere. We do this with the patrons of our collection who travel from across the globe to access the Benson's holdings. We do this with the executive leadership and support from across the university, most notably through the support and engagement of the College of Liberal Arts and the University of Texas Libraries. We extend a distinct thank you to Dean Randy Deal of the College of Liberal Arts and Dr. Lorraine Harricombe, Vice Provost and Director of UT Libraries, and Dr. Fred Heath, who preceded her, for their tireless support, innovation, leadership, and financial investment. They continue to challenge us to move LLILAS Benson in exciting directions, and we are truly blessed by their leadership. And above all, LLILAS Benson is what it is today due to the leadership, energy, intellect, innovation, diplomacy, passion, compassion, and dedication of Charlie Hale. Charlie, tonight we honor, celebrate, and thank you together. What you have started here has forever changed us and is truly changing the world. With that, I am honored to welcome Dr. Lorraine Harricombe, Vice Provost and Director of UT Libraries, to share some additional words about LLILAS Benson and Dr. Charlie Hale.
Good evening. My name is Lorraine Harricombe, and I'm so honored to have been invited to say a few words here. Thank you for that opportunity, Heather. And I also want to thank Charlie as a colleague. Charlie, where are you? Right there. I want to thank you for your bold and effective leadership here at LLILAS Benson. I've been here since February 2015, so just about 15 months ago when I arrived, and I had the distinct pleasure of working very closely with Charlie. He has such a clear vision and clarity of purpose for LLILAS Benson, and his passion shows in everything he does. Just after a few short years as director of LLILAS Benson, there were 3 external reviewers who came to this campus, and after talking with faculty, with students, and with staff, concluded that the LLILAS Benson partnership was a resounding success. Charlie had 2 more years to go, and they already declared that. Here's what they wrote. We cannot exaggerate the importance of the role that Professor Hale has played in reinventing and fortifying the LLILAS Benson. His stewardship was crucial for the deepening of institute and library ties. As VP and Director of UT Libraries, my vision is to transition UT Libraries increasingly from a service provider to an active and engaged partner with the campus community. To me, the LLILAS Benson partnership embodies that vision, and it is heartening to see early successes of the partnership between faculty and librarians as they work together to integrate the collection's content and more fully into the curriculum. As director, Charlie struck me as someone with the most thorough grasp of the importance to researchers of partnerships with libraries, archivists, and librarians. Deborah Jacobs, who's a dear colleague of mine and who's also dean of the library at Duke University, was also one of the external reviewers. She wrote, through Charlie's support for the Guatemalan Police Archive and the concept of non-custodial archiving, as well as his active involvement with the distinctive collections and programs of the Benson Library, Charlie has helped to develop strong and enduring collections, research collaborations that both further the goals of scholars and highlight the central role that libraries and archives play in advancing those goals, taking advantage of advances in technology to make resources more broadly accessible, both here and well beyond the borders of the US. To me, simply put, Charlie truly gets the strategic role of libraries. His leadership reflects the time and the effort he took to learn more about the many elements that comprise a research library today. One of the poignant moments for me personally was Charlie's initiative to publicly recognize two strong women, Nettie Lee Benson and Teresa Lozano Long, whose vision and contributions to Latin American scholarship significantly shaped today's partnership known as LLILAS Benson. Both were significant in their own right, but it was Charlie's stewardship in deepening of the Institute and library ties that was so crucial to realize the success it now enjoys. The external reviewers wrote, and I quote, "At a time when doubt and uncertainty hover over the humanities, social sciences, and area studies, what they found here was energy, innovation, and a distinctive commitment to reimagine the relationship between research and pedagogy." Charlie embraced his leadership role boldly. One of his advisory council members recently said, "Charlie, everything you promised, you delivered." Charlie, you are now forever etched as a legend at UT. As inaugural director of LLILAS Benson, you're leaving big shoes to fill. The University of Texas at Austin can boast one of the most impressive programs in Latin American studies on the planet, thanks to you. Congratulations, and thank you. It is now my pleasure to invite Professor Richard Flores, who is the Senior Associate Dean of Academic Affairs in the College of Liberal Arts at UT.
Thank you, Lorraine. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. It's a real pleasure to see all of you, in particular because Charlie and I have a lot of history together. I'd like to talk a little bit about that history. Charlie, forgive me in advance, Charlie, but I may not be able to help myself. I noticed that we're here to celebrate, well, I first wrote in my notes, we're here to celebrate Charlie's departure. And I said, well, departure maybe is not the right word. But then being the anthropologist we are, Charlie, I was talking to people. Yeah, we are here to celebrate your departure, at least some of us. I actually have names if you want them. As I said, Charlie and I go back a long way. I remember one of the first, we first met as young associate professors in the Department of Anthropology, although I think you actually came back as assistant, if I recall. Charlie did something crazy. I came from the University of Wisconsin. He came from UC Davis, where he was tenured, but he gave it up to come back here. I thought that was a rather brave move, but he was pretty confident, and in retrospect, he should have been, about the possibilities of being promoted once he got here. Soon after we were here a few years, we began to scheme. He was, at that point, the associate director of LLILAS, or ILAS, and I was the associate director of CMAS. Nick, it was probably not a surprise that we were scheming. I know David Montejano wasn't surprised. And we began to work on various kinds of ideas and projects. Probably the biggest one at that point was the Rockefeller Postdoctoral Fellowship Program and the Abriendo Brecha Conference that developed out of that. Now, I've had a lot of scheming meetings with Charlie. I want to describe one, but I want to describe it from like this sort of third person up in the sky. So Charlie and I will meet, and we're discussing and dialoguing about a particular issue, and I come up with a brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant. And Charlie agrees. We take off from the meeting, and the person in the sky sees the following. Sees me walking away, sort of congratulating myself and patting myself on the back for such a brilliant idea. And sees Charlie pulling out his notebook, checking off a box by my name and said, "Richard's on board." I just have this very strange sense that every time we meet and I come up with an idea, I was led there. And I don't think I'm wrong, to be honest. So after the Rockefeller, we engaged in a number of other projects. But I just wanted to mention one thing. Someone recently made a comment about Charlie being superhuman with the kind of time and commitment and passion that he spends on LLILAS. I'm here to report he's not superhuman. He's actually a robot. Now, how do I know that? Well, maybe this is not quite. Charlie, as you know, runs marathons. And he runs marathons without training. You know, I think this last one, you didn't train a whole lot, and he still finished it. I'm a runner, but I don't attempt to do that. Although I did run one, and we actually had a couple of runs together. And after about the first 7 or 8 miles, I had to really tell Charlie, I can't keep up with you. And he told me a story about the time he ran Boston. I don't know if you remember him telling me this, Charlie. I hope I got this right, but if not, it doesn't matter. He was running Boston, and about mile 16 or 17 is what they call Heartbreak Hill, which is a fairly steep hill, and it's fairly long. And Charlie said he was running and just going up and felt great. Next thing he knows, he's on the ground waking up with people around him, and ambulances and personnel, medical personnel around him. And he's like, he didn't realize it, but he was dehydrated, in pain, and just ignored everything and passed out. Well, I think he's a robot, actually, because that's how he goes about his work. He just moves forward, you know, almost like that pink bunny on the commercials. What is it? The battery bunny. I can say quite proudly, I think, that I had some involvement with Charlie being director. I chaired the committee that nominated him, and I think we did a really good job, and I think we're going to do a good job with the next director. But I want to talk a little bit about what Charlie's done, much of what has been said already. Charlie, you know, would have monthly meetings with Randy and I, or me, or depending on which of us were available. And in those meetings, he twisted our arms several times and cajoled us to where now LLILAS has its own shared faculty. And you have 8 shared faculty as part of LLILAS Benson. That's a real innovation. But I have to say, it's something that I think is actually in the best interest of LLILAS Benson. Many of you know who have been part of centers and directors of centers and part of other kinds of initiatives like that. When you have a teaching mission, it's really hard to fulfill that unless you have a dedicated faculty. And Charlie's been responsible for developing that. On the development front, Charlie has done a first-rate job. Of course, he's always traveling off to Brazil and Mexico and everywhere else. And he's usually traveling in jets by many of these donors, but you know, he is really doing well in terms of the development front. A few years ago, it became apparent that the PhD program was sort of languishing, partly on purpose, we were told, but since that point, he has actually rebuilt the PhD program as well, and it also is really doing well and has a number of great students I see on their website. But of course, it's the LLILAS Benson merger integration that I think has been key to his directorship that we will all remember. And I think that, Charlie, is going to be a lasting piece not only of the university, but of your resume connected to the university. And there are basically 4 points that I'd like to say as I conclude. what makes Charlie so successful? And these are things I try to learn from you. One of the reasons I try to be funny at times is because when I try to speak from the heart, I get a little emotional. So bear with me. I know this happens with my wife and I all the time. The first is respect for others. Those of you who have worked with him know that there is a deep respect for everybody he encounters, whether they agree with him or not, whether they follow his agenda or not. There is just an implicit and deep respect for them. Second is integrity. He is, a person of integrity to the hilt. I don't think I've ever caught Charlie in a lie. Believe me, I've tried, but I've never been able to do it. His commitment to the institution, to the program, to his staff, to his students, and to his colleagues is, I think, beyond most faculty that I see. And finally is his vision. He is a person of vision, and I think that's something we all take with him. Now, since I mentioned my wife a second ago, my wife and I have a little running banter, I should say. We've been married 35 years. She couldn't make it tonight, but we were once told long ago that the success of a marriage is that you have to commit yourself every day to being in love. So our banter goes like the following. She'll say, "Richard, do you love me?" And I say, "Well, it's only 9 p.m. I haven't decided yet for the day." And she looks at me and says, "You don't have an audience. Why are you doing this?" I think, Charlie, it is 6 p.m. The audience is still out on how good of a director you've been. But I'm going to go out on a ledge and say you've been great. So thank you for all you've done. Charlie Hale.
Wow. No one told me there was going to be a roast here, Richard. Thank you all so much for being here. It's really, I'm glad I wrote down some words because I think otherwise I'd be a little speechless. Thanks to this amazing organization. I know it took hours and hours of thinking and work and to pull off a flawless event like this one, and with the wonderful retrospective that we had. The only instruction that I received in response to the query, what do you want me to say in the final words here, was in the negative. Just don't make it like one of those Academy Award speeches where the awardees spend all the time thanking people. I got it. But I do want to acknowledge my predecessors here for their roles in leading these two stellar institutions that we're celebrating this afternoon. Laura and Anne, your sage advice and generous time and contributions have been absolutely crucial in imagining and carrying forward the partnership that we're celebrating today. David, your quiet wisdom and immense stature in the world of Latin American librarianship, without that, this partnership would never have been possible. Bill, you were one of the two or three faculty members, and certainly the only economist who my father insisted I seek out as soon as I came to UT in 1996, and I'm very glad I did. Rick, you recruited me as an ILAS postdoc in 1990, which got me thinking Texas. And you and Betty warmly welcomed my family as we followed the Adams well-trodden path between Guatemala and Austin. Peter, is Peter here? Peter has been extraordinarily appreciative, constructive participant in our scholarly programs over the last decade. Nick, you recruited me as associate director, which got me thinking LLILAS. Brian, you included me in CLASPO. Your LLILAS research project introduced me to the fine British tradition of ending each day of fieldwork with intense collective analysis animated by a bottle of good scotch. When Melissa and I visited Joe and Terry last week, I mentioned that 5 former LLILAS directors would be present. Joe got a twinkle in his eye. 5 former directors? Don't they ever die? No, Joe, we do not. I'm sorry Joe is not here. That was for his benefit. I gave the graduation speech for my Iowa City High School, one of 2 in town, located on the outskirts surrounded by farmland, which our rival in the city center dubbed Cow Pie High. For years afterwards, my mother would periodically lament what she took as the central message of that speech: don't look back. Although my intended message was otherwise, broaden your horizons, etc., she sensed that I had also enunciated a deeper principle that I would live by, and as a corollary, that Iowa City would not figure much in my plans after graduation. She was right. I still do not much care for looking back. So instead of trying to review the last 7 years, even though they have been immensely exciting, productive, and satisfying, I want to share with you a series of principles that I've learned from working with LLILAS Benson, lessons that I will gratefully take with me, and also, I hope, will have ongoing validity for the institutions in the years to come. All these lessons are the products of relationships, occasional failures and missteps, lots of collective analysis of what is to be done. The elements that I most consistently have added to the mix are best conjured by the 2 games that I played most as a kid. I love the strategy of chess, and in hearts, I get an enormous thrill from trying against all odds to shoot the moon. In other words, seize opportunities and proceed strategically. Alone, this contribution does not spell success. Combined with the immense talents that LLILAS Benson faculty, staff, and students bring to the fore, the going gets pretty good. Above all, our value as a university and our reputation as the foremost Latin American studies program and library in the nation lies with the students we train and their achievements as they make their way in the world. Even though our undergraduate major is small, we keep winning Dean's Distinguished Graduates, now 6 years in a row. Yes! And our graduate program just rocks. No other way to say it. Great faculty and staff, Lorraine, Perla, Cindy, Seth, are of course essential. An equally key principle follows. Our students are organized. You have forged community, become each other's teachers, and shaped your own education. Your energy radiates outward. You provide the powerful evidence of our success. No one chooses his or her boss. We just have to make the best of the hand we're dealt. LLILAS Benson got dealt an awfully good hand in Randy Deal, Richard Flores, and Lorraine Harricombe. But still, we have our share of challenges and occasionally differences of perspectives. In fact, I had one with Richard just this morning.
I was going to talk about it.
I won't talk about it. The key principle for me in this realm has been the great value of regular, frank, face-to-face communication. There is simply no substitute, certainly not email, for the personal rapport and the confianza that we've built in this way. Thank you, Lorraine and Richard, for that. Working with Juliette Hooker as Associate Director for 5 years served as a critical reminder that our universities are still replete with unwanted hierarchies, especially around race and gender. which are often inadvertently reproduced, especially when the director is an Anglo male. Juliet always urged me to focus first on systems. Is there something in the way LLILAS is structured, in our organizational patterns as opposed to individual behaviors, that needs to be changed? This systems principle requires critical self-reflection, a capacity to step back, to pay attention to how we move in the world, how others experience our movements. Self-reflection allows us to imagine system changes that can help create an organization more fully attentive to the values we espouse. In most administrators' offices at UT, you'll spot a prominently displayed book with a bright red cover called Good to Great. When I became director, I said, I got to get one of those too. And I read it and tried to assimilate its lessons, level 5 leadership, the hedgehog concept, the culture of discipline, etc. But when Heather Gilland came on board in 2011 as LLILAS Benson Executive Director, until that time, none of these ideas really congealed. What Heather has taught us goes way beyond anything in that book. I want to tentatively call it the principle of mission-driven organizational democracy. That's small d democracy, nothing to do with Sanders and Clinton. A set of practices that allow every staff member to be heard, to have their contribution valued, to feel deeply invested in our collective endeavor, and then bringing this bottom-up energy into synchrony with the strategic goals that our LLILAS Benson mission dictates. Organizational democracy comes with the twin principle of staff empowerment. We're not a placid or compliant bunch, and that's the way it should be, as the pictures that were put together amply demonstrated. Our staff speaks out and speaks up, not just in internal affairs, but in scholarly program settings when our mission leads us to engage society with a voice of conscience. Whether the topic is immigrant rights, campus carry, human rights in Latin America, I'm proud that our staff are vocal, and I suspect that this assertiveness correlates with being at the top of their professional games. It also contributes to our esprit de corps. How many other units around campus have a fun committee, which creates spaces for socialization? You probably are going to have a hard time guessing what that acronym stands for, FUN. I'm not going to tell you. I learned from Joe and Terry Long and others on our amazing advisory council how organizations like ours build endowments, how to ask others to help, and why endowments are so important. There'll be an envelope on the way out. You can. In that same visit last week, Joe was musing, Hispanics sometimes get irritated with me because I'm so direct. Terry gently corrected him. Not just Hispanics, honey. I'm doing my very best to emulate as much of Joe's direct style as I can get away with. Beyond the virtue of directness, Joe and Terry have taught us a profoundly valuable lesson, making a first-rate education available to all, especially those who have worked hard, who deserve it, and who have been deprived an equal opportunity in our society and across the hemisphere. That's an incredibly powerful idea which inspires generosity and mobilizes action. Sometime in mid-2010, I told Joe with chagrin that LLILAS had lost Title VI, a big federal grant that supports area studies. His response gave me great solace. We need to raise endowments so we can stop depending on the federal government. I started learning a whole lot about fundraising. We created a development office and recruited Celeste Mendoza. Where's Celeste? There she is. A consummate development professional to lead the effort. In retrospect, that initial period of adversity, which was not just Title VI, but also a massive budget cut that we had to negotiate our way partially out of with my good friend Richard Flores. that adversity, I'm not saying, now this is a little tricky, because I don't want to say that budget cuts produce positive outcomes. That would be a bad message. But it did produce, the adversity did produce an historic opportunity. It forced us to turn inward, to regroup, to make hard decisions about internal resources, and to chart our true course. Out of that reflection, we forged the idea for the LLILAS Benson Partnership. And I learned from Fred Heath, then Vice Provost and University of Texas Libraries Director, another principle. Successful organization building requires a high tolerance for uncertainty. If the final objective is justified and the plan reasonably sound, you go for it, even if there's no map to follow. The idea of recruiting a scholar with little library experience to head a first-rate library or special collection is uncommon but not unheard of. The idea of joining that same library with its counterpart research and teaching institution is downright audacious. We're creating a space of deep collaboration between two units of convergent missions, but very different operations and organizational cultures. This requires patient learning and dialogue, constantly turning the kaleidoscope, addressing the complexities that come into view. Building the LLILAS Benson Partnership is something akin to shooting the moon. In this endeavor, we have an ironclad commitment to maintain the distinct identities, the Teresa Lozano Long Institute of Latin American Studies, the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection, while reshaping internal relations through constant communication across difference. In Spanish, there's a nice term for this, which I have to thank Paloma for. Juntos, pero no revueltos. Julianne Gilland, Benson Director, has been my principal mentor in the art of being juntos, pero no revueltos. Each time I feel I've gained a basic grasp of some aspect of the Benson, she gently peels back the onion skin to reveal the next level of complexity. Not only in technical library operations, but also in the Benson's organizational psychology. The principle here for the LLILAS Benson Director is straightforward. Understand enough about what the Benson does to nurture deep strategic engagement with LLILAS, have the good sense to admit what you don't know, and the humility to defer to the library professionals who do. At the heart of the expanding collaborative space of LLILAS Benson lies digital scholarship and post-custodial archival initiatives. Kent Norsworthy, who retired recently and was also involved in the Atlantic adventure that was featured, taught me how to think about the former. Digitization is not just a more efficient way to build an archive or make it universally accessible. Crucially, it holds immense potential for the transformation in our routines of teaching and research. Post-custodial archival practices I learned from T.K. Sangwan and Teresa Polk not only means making the documents available while keeping the originals in place, it crucially also means these practices animate and reinforce the principle of collaboration that drives our broader vision of Latin American studies. Our incredibly talented faculty, nearly 170 strong, is the lifeblood of LLILAS Benson. Yet it is at times a challenge moving from this affirmation to an effective formula for widespread and sustained faculty engagement in LLILAS Benson affairs. There will always be the exceptional colleagues, some of whom are here tonight, and they are on a sure path to the ever after. Exceptional colleagues who heed the call to service as an act of professional conscience. For the rest, the principle they have taught me is figure out where faculty energies are already flowing, get with the flow, then channel it subtly toward LLILAS Benson goals of socially engaged interdisciplinary excellence and toward building a dynamic intellectual community that everyone wants to join. Our recently hired 8 shared faculty members that Richard referenced will be absolutely key to this principle in the future. What an outstanding group, hailing from Trinidad, Brazil, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Paraguay, Mexico, and Guatemala. Y Argentina, perdón. I knew I missed one. Danny, are you here? Argentina, presente. Gracias. It's an amazing group of colleagues. Amid a highly diverse plenary of scholars, no director can ring everybody's chimes. Our contribution will be respected more and will accomplish more if we stand by our enunciated core priorities and values, showing pluralist magnanimity toward those who might not fully agree. That delicate balance between achieving focused priorities and assuring the pluralist inclusion of all is among the most important of LLILAS Benson principles. This focus on priorities also allows us to reach across the campus while making sure that we remain an idea leader, and to echo very much what Lorraine Harricombe said, to be sure that we remain an idea leader, never merely a service provider. In the coming months, drawing on the immense talent of our faculty, students, and staff, on our deep experiences in and with Latin America, and on the LLILAS Benson partnership as blueprint, I want us to provide a model for realizing our president's recently announced aspiration to make UT a truly global university. Let me conclude by returning to a touchstone of Latin American studies that we've built over the last 7 years. A commitment to training students, creating knowledge, and preserving the documentary record, while highlighting the goal of engaging society's most pressing problems of research and teaching with social impact. This, I believe, embodies the very best of Latin America's radical tradition. A reference not to grand utopias, revolutions, and the like, which haven't turned out all that well, but rather to people's daily collective efforts to overcome adversity, to contest inequality, to remake their worlds with a social justice compass. The very experiences that inspired so much of us to seek out Latin American studies in the first place. We find this principle in unsuspected places. I attended Teresa Polk's recent job talk for the position of postcustodial archivist and found myself getting a little bit emotional at the end. Luckily I had glasses on, so no one noticed. Where's Teresa? I hope I have permission to quote you. I'm quoting. I wonder if we might, she's talking about the idea of care as a kind of a principle of archival management. I wonder if we might adapt this idea of care, of a caring society. I wonder if we might adapt this idea of care to the paradigm that grounds post-custodial archiving within a human rights framework. A paradigm that links at a fundamental level care for collections, with care for the communities represented in those collections, with care for the archivists, the other professional staff, and the researchers who engage those collections on a daily basis, unquote. This is, now I swear to God, Heather and I did not talk before formulating our respective words. This is Teresa's archive-inspired corollary to our university's motto. If what starts here is going to change the world, we need to lay the groundwork at home, making the everyday operations of LLILAS Benson embody the values of social change to which we inspire. I decided to leave the directorship out of respect for a principle, and this is the final one, the final principle, that my parents implemented many years ago for our family gatherings. 3 days maximum. Leave when you're still having fun, enjoying one another, and wishing it could last a few days more. I'm not really ready to leave. But I decided that the time, analogous to our 3-day family vacation rule, has arrived. I love research and teaching, the job to which I plan to return. But I have to admit that I've also been smitten by the challenge and satisfaction of building this amazing organization along with all of you. This amazing organization called LLILAS Benson. And that pulls me in a different direction. So thanks to you all for sending me off with this existential dilemma. And thanks to Randy and Richard for the sabbatical during which, in addition to rediscovering the joys of chess and hearts, I hope Melissa and I will reach clarity as to the path that lies ahead. Thank you.
So normally I would wing these remarks, but just like Richard, I might get too emotional, so I wrote some remarks for you, Charlie, very brief. We are, LLILAS Benson, and each of us individually is forever indebted to you for all of the time, talent, heart, and soul that you've poured into our work. LLILAS Benson is stronger because of you and your leadership, as is the direction of Latin American Studies and Collections. There are not sufficient words to express how deeply we will miss you. As a small token of our gratitude and of our affection for you, the LLILAS Benson staff and shared faculty have pitched in to provide you with this gift. Before you open it, we hope it's something that helps remind you of us each time you see it. But I also want to share with you that there was such an outpouring of support for you from the staff and the shared faculty that we had more donations than we needed to purchase your gift. We're not putting them in the envelope at the door, unfortunately. I should have thought of that. Sorry, Celeste. But in addition to this gift, we're making a donation in your name to the Workers' Defense Project, a community-based organization established by a graduate of the LLILAS BA program, and one which you've played a direct role in supporting. Charlie, from all of us at LLILAS Benson, we say thank you, gracias, obrigada, y que viva Charlie!
So Nick Shumway gave me a little bit of grief now because the rule was business, what's it called? Business attire?
They told me business attire.
And I came up with it. So the very first faculty reception, I said to Melissa, what should I wear? Should I wear a suit and tie or should I wear a going event? She said, you cannot wear a suit and tie, you have to wear a going event. And today she gave me the same exact instruction. I follow Melissa's instructions on sartorial matters. Wow. And now more guayaberas. There's nothing like guayaberas in the heat of Texas. Especially when you ride your bicycle. Thank you so much. Thank you. Two of them. my understanding is that there's a pachanga next door, and we sincerely hope you'll all join us over there. Is there something else that needs to be said? Thank you for being here.